Now that we've covered the column chart best practices, let's open the column chart tab. Here we see a table of data all about past Olympic Games and a few future ones as well, with details about each, such as the year, the type, and the location. The directions are asking us to show the number of games that were hosted by countries from each continent. Now again, if you think about it, the data in the table is shown in more detail than we really want, so we'll have to summarize the data by country before we can actually create the chart. So let's first do it in the table down here. And since we're trying to find the number of countries, we know we want to count. So we'll use a count ifs. And this time we want to count if the continent is equal to, at least for the first one, the Americas. And since we're counting summer and winter, we want to make sure that the type is equal, in this case, to summer. So we get 7. So there were 7 Summer Olympics held in the Americas. Now to make this easier on ourselves, we're going to do some locking, and then we'll be able to actually copy this down and over before we calculate the totals. That way we don't have to make multiple COUNTIF functions separately. So our references are going to stay the same. So we have in this case, we have the continents. Those references aren't going to change, so we'll go ahead and lock those. And the type is not going to change. That references, we always want to refer to those. So we'll lock those ones. Now we're left with, in this case, the red one is the Americas. So we want America to change to get Asia, Europe, and Oceania when we copy it down. So it's always going to stay in the same column, but we want the rows to change. So we'll lock the column letter and leave the row numbers alone. Now when we copy this down, this summer one down, we don't want the row to change. So let's go ahead and lock the row. But when we copy it over, we do want the column to change to winter. So we'll leave the column unlocked. Now when we copy this down and then over to the winter column, all of our values are calculated for us, except the totals, and we'll just use a quick sum function to calculate the totals. Copy that down. And now we have all of the data summarized that we need. Now again, we could have done this in a pivot table if you didn't want to deal with all of the functions and locking the cells. So let's do that as well. Click somewhere in the data table, insert a pivot table, make sure it's selected your entire range inside your table, and then we are going to place this where it says place your pivot table here. Sorry, that's down a little low, but you see the yellow cell. Press OK. Yep, it's OK. We'll overwrite that. And I'm going to scroll so we can actually see what we're doing. That would be helpful. Okay, and the idea is to recreate this, and essentially we're recreating the table we had above as well. So we're trying to show all of these continents in these rows. So the continent is going to become our row. And then we want to show the summer and winter. See, there's a type up here. As soon as you see a type up in this section, you know that you need something in the column section. So let's go ahead and choose type for the columns. And that gives us summer and winter and a grand total. So what are we trying to count? Well, we're trying to count the number of times a game has been played there. So we could count the number or the year. Either would work because we're counting. So I'll grab a number or year. And this is giving me the sum of the year. I don't want a sum of the year. Instead, I want the count, because I want to count the number of times each of these happened. So for instance, we can see that Europe has hosted the Summer Olympic Games 21 times. That's what we're looking for. Just going to do a quick, we have the totals here, but our pivot table went ahead and totaled both the rows and the columns, and we only want to total the rows. So under Grand Totals in the Design tab, I'm going to turn it on for rows only, and that will get rid of the total across the bottom. While I'm here, I'm going to change report layout to show an outline form, and you'll see instead of showing row labels and column labels, it will actually change it to continent and type, so it describes what it really is. All right, now that we have the data summarized, and we've summarized it in two different ways, let's go ahead and plot it in a chart. To build the chart, I'm first going to select the data, and I want my continents and the summer and winter data, but I do not want the totals, because my summer and winter data are going to make up the totals, so I don't need to plot the totals in the chart as well. Now I will go up and insert, click the drop-down arrow next to columns, and choose a 2D clustered column chart. And it very nicely put this all together for me, which is great. All right, so place my chart here. I'm going to resize the chart area just a little bit. Now we need to do some adding of things. So we already have a legend over here. If for some reason you didn't, again, up in the Design tab, you could click and add a legend. So that would put the legend right there. We also, in this case, need to add a chart title if it hasn't already. Nope, no chart title. So let's grab a chart title above the chart. And while I'm here, the axis titles, horizontal and vertical. And then we'll add a source here in a minute. All right, so the axis title along the horizontal X is going to be location or continent. And then along the left side, the number of times hosted. Hopefully your typing is better than mine. Okay, oops, I don't need to format that right now. Okay, chart title, so Olympic Games hosts. And while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and put this plot area border on just to make it look a bit nicer. So format my plot area, and I want a solid line as the border. Pick a new color if you need to. And I'm going to make my chart or my plot area just a little bit bigger as well to make this data stand out. And I may need to adjust my legend and move that to make it easier to see. There we go, we'll just get it up and out of the way so it can be seen easily. All right, the last thing you need to do is add your source. Go to Insert, Text Box, and in this case the source was Olympic.org. Remember to adjust anything you need in your chart area or your plot area to make sure that it can be seen clearly. So I think I'm going to decrease the size of this just a smidge to make it a little bit clearer, and then I'm going to click in my chart area and make this just a little bit bigger to make sure I can really read everything well. And now we have a side-by-side stacked column chart.